Good morning. Oh my God, buenos dias. Come on, I know it's 9 a.m., we're early here, but we're alive and it's a day to celebrate. Distinguished faculty, staff, graduates, and guests, Chair and my former Professor Boaz, thank you for the invitation to speak here today, although you might regret it when I'm done in 2 hours. I also want to take a moment to recognize Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who's with us here today. Thank you for being with us and your leadership in these difficult times. I also want to take a moment to first thank the workers, the staff, and production team that have hustled to make today's ceremony possible. Thank you so much. We see you. We appreciate you. And to the parents, families, and friends here, congrats are in order for you too. Your love and support have also made today possible, so thank you. And of course, to the class of 2023, congratulations. You've now earned your political science degrees, which means you're officially qualified to argue with your relatives at Thanksgiving. Yes, as political science graduates, you now have the knowledge and skills to analyze complex geopolitical issues, like trying to understand the MBTA subway map. In all seriousness, it is an honor to be here with you today. As Professor Boaz mentioned, just 8 years ago, I sat in your seats. And I'll be honest, I don't remember any of the speeches. I do remember looking across this hall and wondering how many of my classmates I had yet to meet. Fate is a funny thing, though. A few rows ahead of me, there was a student I never met named Dan O'Halloran. I never spoke to him during our undergraduate years, nor did I meet him at commencement. Yet just 3 months later, Dan would become my first campaign manager as I embarked on a campaign for city council in my hometown of Haverhill, Massachusetts. The first time I met Dan in person was the day of my campaign kickoff in 2015. As we headed into the backyard of the two-family home I grew up in, I asked him what my remarks should focus on. He said, I think these remarks are pretty light and friendly. You walk in and say, I'm Andy Vargas, and I'm running because I said, whoa. It's pronounced Vargas or Vargas. And I had to clarify that for him. But what followed was a whirlwind campaign. Around town, we were met with it's so nice to see young people running for office, but just know that you're going to have to run 2, 3, 4, 5 times before you win. And occasionally we got are you sure Haverhill is ready to elect a Latino elected official? 10,000 doors knocked later, 6 months after my commencement, we made history. I was elected to the city council and became the city's first Latino elected official. More importantly, I made a lifelong friend in Dan, who I didn't know was sitting amongst us during commencement. And so as you graduate today and wonder whether or not you made the most of your time here, know that this community, your peers, your professors, your collective BU world, can be a place for you to lean on in the months and years ahead in ways that you might not even imagine right now. When I sat in your seats, I had no idea that I was going to run for city council, despite what Chair Boaz said, thinking I was a natural politician. I was grappling with the very real question that some of you might be thinking about right now. Do I go back home, or do I set my sights on a job in DC, Boston, New York, or another big city with interesting public policy jobs, or law school or grad school? I had just completed a White House internship and found myself reflecting on a conversation that President Obama had with our cohort. One of my peers asked the president the existential question that many of us were thinking about. She asked, Mr. President, what do you think is the key to living a fulfilling life? The president paused and slowly leaned in and said something to the effect of, look, let me be clear. He said, the key to living a fulfilling life is to not think about what you want to be, but think about what you want to do. And he explained that as early as our toddler years, we're asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And our answers, of course, change through the years, but more often than not, they're focused on particular titles: an astronaut, scientist, lawyer, congressperson, or president. Instead, President Obama suggested we focus on what we want to do, the actions or changes we want to see. Are you the scientist who cures cancer, the lawyer that fights for immigrants, the congressperson that will tackle climate change? Those are actions that we want to take, not necessarily titles or images of who we want to be. I wrestled with that for a bit. Why did I feel like I had to go to DC or stay in a big city? Why was going back to my hometown of Haverhill, a small city, post-industrial, 65,000 people, not on the table? I realized that my interest in staying on at the White House or working in DC was more about who I wanted to be versus what I wanted to do. I was driven by an image that society bears on young graduates that success means putting on a suit every day and walking into the White House, Capitol Hill, or a top firm in a big city. It became clear that what I wanted to do was to create change in education, housing, and economic justice as soon as possible. I wanted to add unique value and go where I was needed most. And growing up in Haverhill, we constantly received messages that getting out is the goal. And for a long time, I believed it. It's the story that young people in small to mid-sized cities across this country get told every day. But that narrative, that message that youth hear in small to mid-sized cities fueled my pivot of running from my hometown to running for my hometown. If there's one thing you remember from this speech, except for the corny jokes, let it be this. Consider going back to your hometown or where you can make the most immediate change and provide the most unique value. That can be the local community you volunteered in during your time here in Boston, or underserved communities in other parts of the country or world. Go to the forgotten neighborhoods, the underappreciated communities, the small cities and towns. Go where you are needed most. If you do, I promise you will be a change agent much faster and make change in much more meaningful ways. And you don't have to run for office. You can join a city board, work for a nonprofit, serve in town hall, or start a company. Pero por favor, please consider bringing your talents where you are needed most. If you do choose to run, here's the best kept secret in municipal politics. Most people don't run real campaigns. Most municipal elections are ripe for a new class of candidates. Candidates who understand digital technology and can knock on doors. Candidates who can inspire the turnout of a new generation of voters. Candidates like you. And look, it's no secret that running and serving in public office are exceptionally challenging endeavors, personally, professionally, and even financially. Just ask my wife, who's here today. And like any service-driven role, the decision to run or work in public service isn't always rational. Maybe that's why politics attracts too many irrational people. But that is exactly why we need all you rational people to make the irrational decision to take up the ranks of public service. And the good news is that you all have experience making irrational decisions, like deciding to major in political science, or taking your life into your own hands and walking across Comm Ave. Whether or not you choose to go back home, run for office, or pursue a service-driven career, every graduate here shares a common commitment. You all have a responsibility to this country, this world, to bring us towards fulfilling the values that we proudly proclaim on paper, but so often come up short on. And candidly, some graduating classes have more responsibility than others. Some graduating classes have a more fraught dance with democracy than others. This graduating class has grown up through multiple crises and periods of social, racial, and economic tension. The Black Lives Matter movement, the resurgence of white supremacy, the erosion of women's and LGBTQ rights, the unconscionable frequency of gun violence, the brazen treatment of immigrants as political pawns, the pervasive student loan debt crisis, and not to mention the global pandemic that happened throughout your entire college career. FDR perhaps put it best when he said, "To some generations, much is given. Of other generations, much is expected." Much is expected of you, but I have an unshakable faith in you because I know that the system, our social contract, is broken. Some of you even know that while it is broken, it's working exactly as intended. Unfair as it may be, history has dealt you this hand, and yet you are fortunate to be the generation that gets to play this hand. Fortunate because history tells us that it is precisely in these moments of upheaval and turmoil that triumphant leaders and movements emerge. And looking out at this class, I have no doubt that you possess the ideas to imagine a new social contract and the determination to deliver it. You only need to look to your peers here today for inspiration and reassurance. Graduates like Avery Bolden. Avery's family was rejected from housing in Chicago when she was a child because they were black. Their landlord explicitly said so. She went on to do her BA, MA thesis on the impacts of racial housing covenants and educational outcomes in Chicago. She's now heading to law school at the University of Chicago. Or you can look to Lara Wernick, the daughter of Brazilian immigrants, who endured comments like, "Go back to your country," when her parents did their best to communicate in English. Here at BU, she co-founded Migration Tales, which elevates the stories of immigrants, and today she graduates after defending her honors thesis on Brazilian immigrants in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Avery and Lara found purpose in their stories. Instead of running from the systemic flaws that they are intimately familiar with, they run towards them with solutions that are rooted in their lived experience. And so let me just close with this. I know you guys are hoping I close soon. Thank you. There is no guarantee of progress. You have to go out and create the conditions to make progress inevitable. You must build the political capital and coalitions necessary. You must be willing to do the work and not cede ground to those who wish cynicism settles in. And as you go about this work, here are 3 frameworks I've learned along this journey. Number 1, reject the false choice that you must squarely either be an idealist or a pragmatist, that you either fall into the incrementalist or the radical systemic change camp. There are too many people hungry, underhoused, and under-resourced today to wait for the political capital necessary to make radical systemic change. Conversely, our challenges are so deeply rooted that we must not be satisfied until we achieve nothing less than transformational systemic change. And there will be moments in your life where you have to decide which version of you is needed more, the idealist or the pragmatist. And not every accomplishment will be transformational, but each victory is another brick you've placed in the new construction or reconstruction of our society. Celebrate those incremental wins because they are the fuel and the joy needed to endure in this work. Number 2, be stubborn about your values, but be flexible with your lexicon. Too often we fail to build bridges or human connections because we speak to people with words we understand, but that they cannot hear. When I ran for state representative in 2017, my opponents thought that focusing on immigration would produce panic and weaken our campaign. A Latino candidate, soft on immigration. As a result, when we knocked on doors, voters sometimes said, "Andy, I want to vote for you, but I don't understand why you support sanctuary cities. Why would we have a city of lawlessness?" Despite our initial attempts to educate voters on the real definition of sanctuary cities and emphasize our nation's history as a land of immigrants, that fell flat. It was clear that our message wasn't breaking through because, unlike Fox News, we weren't in their living room every night, defining the term for them. So we shifted our approach. We aligned our message with numerous chiefs of police who said they didn't want to waste their time and precious staffing time and tax dollars on pursuing people who pose no threat to public safety and contribute so much to our community. This approach resonated with voters and neutralized attempts to undermine our campaign. We were steadfast and stubborn with our values, but flexible and thoughtful with our words. And number 3, when you get into leadership positions, remember that politics, service, leading a life of purpose are about whom or what you're willing to take the hits for. The best indicator of transformational leadership is when you draw people out of their comfort zone. In some cases, that means attracting opposition, taking a position outside the consensus. My suggestion for you is to establish a framework to help you decide when it is time to compromise and when it is time to take the hits, regardless of the political or social capital lost. And as you embark on this journey, be hopeful, but also cognizant that you do not take the bait of complacency. This is particularly for those that have overcome great adversity to get here, the graduates that have proved the statistic wrong. When you land that dream job, win an election, buy a house, or achieve some other measure of success, there will be a moment when society will try to tell you, "See, you can do it, therefore our system's okay." That we can carry on with the same system because the American dream is alive and well. Don't take the bait. Remember what it took for you to get here. Remember what it took those who came before you. And remember that it is within your reach to finally propel the American dream into the American reality. Thank you and congratulations to the class of 2023. Celtics in 7.